Today's webinar is on the topic of being a data-driven energy manager. My name's John Hines. I'm Chief Sales Officer at EnergyCAP Inc. Here's the agenda for today and how we're going to use our time. We're going to talk about the 4 rules of effective campus energy management. We're going to go over what to look for in a EMIS or an energy management information system. Then we'll transition to questions and answers and then have a wrap up. In disclosure, the information I'm presenting on is not something that I came up with myself. The information is taken from case studies, from clients, interviewing with clients, other webinars that we've conducted with clients. All this information is compiled and available on our website, energycap.com/resources. I wanted to make sure that you all are aware of that because this is coming from you. It's coming from campuses, from colleges and universities that we've heard from over the years. We've polled, we've interviewed, they've shared their stories, and we've now compiled them into this presentation, and I'm excited to share this all with you. So, the 4 rules of effective campus energy management. Number 1, energy is not a fixed cost. It is a variable expense. It's also your largest non-payroll expense for many organizations. It is very controllable. We typically like to highlight that it is your number 1 most controllable operating expense. Today's world is even more confusing because you have a lot of options, right? You have purchasing options, you have suppliers for many of you that are in deregulated states, you have different rate schedules, a lot of options out there. You have different fuel mixes that you can use. You have all these choices to make. So if you have access to your data, you can better manage this and make wiser decisions. We actually have a really nice case study, and this is an infographic for the University of Kansas, where University of Kansas has taken control of their energy information. They are accurately managing all of their campus data, which they look at as high priority business processes, where they are billing back and charging back, various departments and tenants on campus. And so having access to the data and making wise decisions is king. They have found numerous opportunities by looking at their data. For instance, steam leaks. So they're in a place where they are generating steam. They're in a climate, they're generating steam, and they're pushing steam out to their grid and to their buildings. And so they've spotted some areas where they said, hey, what we're generating, we're not seeing downstream. We're getting some line loss and some loss along the way. So they've added insulation and fix some of these leak problems. And in doing such, they've been able to calculate some real savings. So not only are they controlling their energy, they're also then making improvements and implementing projects and then realizing savings. So certainly I encourage you to learn more about University of Kansas. Number 2, plan for the long term. Making changes and managing things is not something you should look at as being a short-term goal, okay? This is a marathon, it's not a sprint. Your campus will continue to consume and use energy long past your employment there and your time on campus. Campuses have been around for a very long time, and they're going to continue to be, provided we don't have more of these pandemics or reasons for students not to be on campus. What we've seen from some of our successful campuses is again, a trend that they've established a multi-year vision. So again, this is looking at, hey, what can we do each year and what can be sustainable for many and many years? And then write a plan and make it easy to understand and communicate. If it's too complex, it's really difficult for all team members, all stakeholders to understand it, and it makes it even more difficult to communicate it out. So work on a focus, communicate, and then you got to monitor everything that you're doing. And make sure to highlight benefits beyond energy cost savings. So yes, saving usage, saving, total cost is great. I think all of us are going to realize this next year is going to be vital to the success of most organizations and most campuses, because budgets are really in question right now. I mean, that's no secret. We all know this. But realize that just managing your budget, managing and realizing cost savings is not the only benefit from a long-term goal. You can streamline accounting workflows. So just streamlining internal processes, making everything that you're doing more efficient. With that, sometimes that allows you to reallocate focus to other areas. So if you're streamlining various mundane, labor-intensive processes, you can dedicate time elsewhere. Focus on sustainability. What better time than now? We've all seen the impacts of if humans aren't out there kind of destroying the environment, what happens? It seems like daily I'm reading about kind of the good side of the impact of stay-at-home orders, where the environment is kind of rebounding and wildlife is coming back in certain areas, and pollution and harmful emissions are clearing over certain areas. So certainly focus on sustainability is probably now more important and verified, the value of that more than ever. And then awareness and transparency. So again, just to highlight a client, University of New Mexico has a really nice implemented behavior-based energy reduction and energy management strategy, where they've implemented a plan, and they've been implementing and managing this plan for a long time now. So you can read more about that. Number 3, include stakeholders. You cannot do this alone. You can have all the data you want in the world. You can have a great plan, but if you are a lone wolf, it's destined to fail. It is very difficult to be the one-person operator for your campus. So include stakeholders and think about what stakeholders are the most valuable to the success of this program. And consider thinking beyond facilities. I don't know what all of your job functions are and what your roles are on your campus, but think beyond just facilities. The ones responsible for turning off and on systems, managing the airflow and air quality in buildings, all those kind of things that go with facilities, but also think about accounting and finance as well. What value will they get out of data and a plan to better manage data? What valuable contributions do they bring to the table? Okay. If you're in facilities, consider sustainability to bring those stakeholders in. So a lot of different stakeholders on campus that can help you and what you're doing. Create a culture of conservation. So it might start with you. You could be the catalyst to get the momentum moving forward, but understand that you're going to need stakeholders and support to continue to execute your plan. And then have a plan for frequent, consistent communication, okay? And when you look at stakeholders, think of it this way as well. Who are your champions inside the building? So within your buildings, who can you solicit to help? So building managers, department managers, anyone that's actually has some say and some pull within a building. But also consider students, teachers, professors, custodians, even security. Security at night, if they see buildings that have lights on and that are operating, but they know that no one should be in that building, work on a plan that they can escalate that and communicate that to the team to take action. We've seen with hundreds of our clients that getting students and professors and teachers involved in your energy conservation plans is really valuable. And it is shown, again, in the data, where you can have building systems turn on and off based on automation systems, but inevitably you're going to have some scheduling time during on and off peak hours, and also depending on how old your building is, you might not have a real reliable building automation system in place. So creating an environment and awareness with students and professors, to turn off lights when they leave the room, if they see some lights on, to turn them off, that can also help you in your cause. And then outside the building, you also have stakeholders, your maintenance team, your engineers, those creating plans to do repairs on buildings and really managing your grid and things like that, the scheduling team and controls team. But then deans and department heads, if they're helping their departments conserve and to help you in your efforts, that's really a win-win for everyone. So again, include stakeholders. And number 4, make data-driven decisions. Do not rely solely on national averages or benchmarks. A lot of those are in place, Energy Star and some other things, resources, they're in place for a reason. It's a good qualifier just to say, how am I performing compared to some national standards and national averages? We get a lot of requests from our higher ed clients that say, hey, Energy Star is very limited on a university campus, so what type of analytics can you provide that I can see how we're performing in labs and just other important buildings compared to peer campuses? Hey, I think that's a great discussion. And I think looking at EUI and some of those other metrics is valuable. It's good to look at, but let's be realistic. A campus like Harvard and Boston, if they're comparing versus University of Central Florida and Florida, how are they really comparing apples to apples there? You're talking about a northern, winter climate, and materials that are used to build buildings is much different than what would be used down south in Florida. But getting a general idea of things is valuable. But it is also really hard to compare, apples to apples just based on a lot of factors. So don't solely rely on those. Know your internal campus patterns. Know your data. So that's why having data is vitally important, and data is king. If you have good data for your campus, then you can know your patterns and then start analyzing and assembling your data to take action. When we talk about assembling data, the data, at least from the standpoint of an energy management information system, typically is vendor bills, your plant operations and distributions. So for those campuses, where you're generating utility, steam, chilled water, things like that, or have cogen plants and distribution plants, knowing how those are operating is really valuable. You're acting like your own utility company. So you're not only tracking your vendor bills and understanding that, but for a lot of campuses, the bigger challenge is tracking all the generation and then downstream activities. If you have interval data, great. We'll talk more about interval data soon. But understanding monthly, trends, what you're using and what it's costing you each month is valuable, but understanding what's going on in your building every 15 minutes, 30 minutes is even more valuable. So you can see if, right now, if your building is supposed to be shut down because we're still in quarantine, and your campus is pretty much shut down, are building systems staying off, or are they cycling on, because some setbacks have expired, things like that. For those that are tracking renewables, we have a lot of campus that are doing more renewables tracking, charge stations, even on campus, and doing more with solar, and being able to understand how those impact your carbon footprint and other factors is important. So again, making those decisions based on that framework of data is important. And this is a look again from a client that said, okay, in order to make decisions, there's a lot that goes into it. Data alone isn't, 100% of the way to make a decision, and there's feedback loops. And so the way they look at it is they start with a focus. We kind of talked about that earlier. You start with a focus, and then you have these 4 different areas that you look at. So utility control management, audits and commissioning, energy conservation opportunities, and communication. And each one of those has their own workflow of how to make decisions, how to look at data, make decisions, and then you kind of get the end result of energy conservation. But even once you're at energy conservation, it's a constant loop. Because once you start reporting on energy conservation by looking at the data in these buckets, you then still have to get feedback, and then kind of the loop starts back over, over time. So data is the starting, once you have a focus, you need the data as a starting point, and then to carry out your plan as you have it set up, is going to get you to realize real solid end results. Energy information is foundational to effective campus energy management. Okay, let that sink in. When you start anything on your campus, you really need your energy information. You need data. You have to be able to make further decisions based on the data you have. If you just start making end decisions, how do you measure that? How do you manage those things? For instance, if you want to implement a project, say within a building, you want to implement a retrofit. Well, how do you even know that's a good building to do a retrofit in? How do you know that would be the best, your biggest savings? You need to establish a baseline. Well, you need good data to do that. You need to understand the weather impact. So all that to say, before you can even make the decision to implement the project, you need data, and then you certainly need data to verify savings going forward. So we promote real heavily that information is foundational to anything else that you're doing on campus. And really, in order to, the best use of tracking and managing your data is through an EMIS, or an energy management information system. I'd like for you to say that EnergyCAP is the best system out there, but there's a lot of different systems. Okay, there's a whole EMIS framework, and the EMIS framework is typically these 2 sides. There's a whole building level EMIS, which is tracking data that's used for benchmarking and utility bill analysis and your advanced energy information systems. And then there's more the real-time tracking of data from building automation systems and that are tracking what's going on in real time and fault detection. So hey, we have an air handler that looks like it's going to fail, so alert someone and let them create a work order and take action. All of those are various levels of energy information, but typically when we look at the framework, there's these 2 sides. It's whole building and then really system level tracking, okay? We're going to focus on the whole building level. Generally, the mission of an EMIS is to allow you to derive value from your energy information in the form of informative and actionable data. So your data comes from a lot of different sources: vendor utility bills and smart meter and BAS systems, on-site generation and facility data, occupancy, hours of operation, all those kind of things. Well, you have just these different data elements from all of these sources, all of these places, and you need to get that into a system of some sort so you can make it informative and actionable. And then once you have that data, you need to be able to do various things with the data. And again, we look at a couple different pillars of job functions that are the main ingesters of this data and that make sense of it. So you have your energy management pillar that, for all of you that have to do, manage your buildings and you're trying to benchmark buildings and do M&V activities, and you need to submit the Energy Star and do sustainability actions, that would include you. So you need systems and processes to take action on the data to allow you to accomplish your job. Then you have a whole accounting pillar that is saying we need to do our budgeting and accruals and internal use and cost allocations for departments. So we need some tools and some ways to look at our data in order to perform our job function. And then kind of last is building operations. We need the smart meter data. We need to look at on-site generation and what we're distributing to our grid in order to make good, informative, and actionable decisions. So typically, EMISs are helping all of those job functions. So what to look for in an energy management information system? This might seem really obvious that you would want online accessibility. Quote from a Big Ten university, "It's a big advantage over the complex spreadsheets many colleges and universities are using." Now think about that. I would venture to guess that there's a percentage of attendees that would watch this presentation that are saying, well, yeah, I'm still using spreadsheets to do a lot of my job function. I'm not saying spreadsheets are bad. Spreadsheets are very flexible. I use spreadsheets all the time. A lot of our company does for various purposes. We all get the value of Excel, but when you're using Excel and spreadsheets, it's really hard to share data. And there's a lot of value in going online and having an online tool, especially in the new work from home scenario. Being able to share data and give access to others and everyone kind of connect to one data source and one database, that's really important. It's also important to have all of your data in a secure environment that meets accessibility requirements and ADA and things like that. So it's not just having online accessibility, but also secure and available online accessibility. Another quote from a campus, when asked, why did you adopt an EMIS? Well, it's to replace the color-coded spreadsheet. And I really kind of love this analogy. Data's king. Colors even really help. But when I look at this, it's saying, okay, that's a lot of good data. Yes, but how do you kind of give it life? How do you paint a good picture with this? It's really, really difficult. It's just a listing of a bunch of data, okay? And the color coding typically is done through formatting in Excel to help highlight things. That's great. But again, how actionable really is this? And I'm sure this, again, looks familiar, but it's one of those things that this doesn't scream modern and let's standardize on something around campus. This is generally, hey, I'm working on this and I know my spreadsheets, I know my colors, leave me alone and off I go. We're in Big Ten country. That's why I'm highlighting some of the Big Ten universities. So this was the workflow from a Big Ten university that shared with us pre-implementation of an EMIS that said, here's what our workflow looks like, and using these color-coded spreadsheets where we have building automation system data, we have vendor data, those go in, building automation system goes into a meter validation database, then that goes into spreadsheets, and that goes into a second set of spreadsheets, and then that spreadsheet goes to SAP to post for general ledger purposes. But there's also a mail merge that goes to an invoice that gets generated and gets sent to the customer, and then the customer provides feedback, and then there's reporting on all of that process. And then there's vendor information that comes in paper bills. It goes to a separate database and separate spreadsheets and separate processes and separate invoices. Right? It's again, data, great. They're getting reports and they're getting workflow done, but it's kind of really cumbersome. And whenever they have a problem, they don't really know where in the process to go. They don't know what database is the source of record. They don't know who's responsible for it. And reporting is really a mix of multiple databases. And so when you look at your report, hard to trust and really verify data in the report to take action on, because half the time you're just trying to find if there's any problem and if you really trust what you're looking at. What this process looks like after implementing is this. Building automation data and meter data still go into a metering database. You know, because metering, I'm sure most of you have metering systems on campus. That's typically what we find, like an OSI soft PI system or a Schneider system, Siemens, you know, all those various metering systems. They're reading meters and reading equipment and bringing that data into their database, their warehouse. And then what's nice about this process is whatever systems or metering databases you have, all of that goes into the utility database, whether it's 15-minute data, hourly data, monthly data, just depends on the interval you want. All that metering data goes into the utility database. So now all stakeholders can report on meter data in the utility database. All vendor data goes directly into the database. Billing validation gets done in the EMIS and in the database. If you have any manual meter reads, they go directly into the database. You know, all production and plant activity gets tracked there. And then that database feeds everything else, okay? So you're talking about a robust database that is receiving all this data, processing it, validating it, making sure it's accurate, and then feeding financial systems. So in this case, SAP, providing reporting, providing invoices to customers if needed, providing dashboards, reports, analytics, you know, so on and so forth. So the workflow is so much easier because you can just visualize, okay, meter data and vendor data coming in, and then everything's being done in the data warehouse. For this particular campus, it has multiple campuses, so each campus is going to this one database and answering a lot of questions and sharing a lot of data with one another. When they have a question about the validity of data, they just know exactly where to go. There's no, you know, if I take a step back here, they're not going back to the spreadsheets and various other databases and processes. They know exactly where to go. So that's the value in collecting all your data in one system. So some other value streams is low labor data entry. So if you have a system in place, then you can import bills through various formats. If you don't want to really even receive or process bills, there's options for bill acquisition. So, receiving bills on your behalf or receiving PDF bills and OCRing those bills and loading them for you. Typically, labor can be reduced by 80% to process an invoice by implementing an EMIS. So you're looking at probably hard costs. You might not realize this, but most organizations are spending anywhere from $12 to $15 per invoice with all labor, overhead, systems, computers, everything kind of fully loaded. It's generally costing about that much to process a bill, and that can be reduced to like $2 to $3, kind of hard cost by streamlining processes, and it allows your staff to focus on higher, more valuable tasks. Another value stream by getting away from spreadsheets and some of those is automated bill auditing and verification. So if data is in a more robust database like SQL or Oracle or one of those, then more checks can be run on the data, and there can be greater visibility of problems with data. hopefully, the system has a work order or a issue tracking system that can flag bills and then allow you to track all the activities of everyone within your campus following up on any types of problems with your data. So catching data issues and then following up on them is real important. A little bit of a kind of a, it sounds simple, but it's more complex than that, is tracking deregulated utilities. Again, for any of you that are in deregulated states where you're getting a you're getting a distribution bill by your LDC and you're getting a supply bill by a contracted supplier, and you might be shopping and switching suppliers. But putting those together, comparing them, tracking the use and cost of both, but then trying to separate, the usage so you're not double counting, it actually gets to be kind of a challenge. We found that a lot of campuses just over time, have made just accidental mistakes by double counting the consumption. So for instance, if your LDC or your distribution company charges you $110 for 100 kilowatt hours, but then your supplier charges you $200 for the supply portion of the 100, what are you reporting on? Really, that should be 100 kilowatt hours for that meter and $310 worth of cost. But in some cases, organizations are reporting 200 kilowatt hours. So, the ability to track so you can compare that you're getting billed properly, but then not double counting, gets to be important. So this is just an example of the smart analytics and the smart validation processes that can go into an EMIS. Tracking and reporting interval data is very important. Bill data is a necessary evil. You get utility bills, you have to track them and pay them, and monthly data tends to be easier to understand and to track and report on. But interval data is king. It shows your heartbeat of the building, allows you to create bills. A lot of campuses are creating bills, based on interval data. An EMIS should be able to ingest data from any metering system, and it should also be allow you to make manual changes. For instance, if a meter fails, you can create estimated reads, or you can enter a manual read if you still have old legacy analog meters. We had an interesting story from a client of ours who, the buildings is a school client. Buildings are shut down during most of March, April, and they're still shut down today. Well, we looked at their interval data with them, and we found that across the board, they had a day, it was Wednesday, April 8th, where all their systems just started turning on in a lot of their buildings. And what the end result was that they had a setback turned on, but it was scheduled for a 3-week period, and they kind of forgot about it, thinking that the quarantine wasn't going to last for much longer. So they saw this and they started to ask, why did my building turn on during quarantine shutdown? Well, then they drilled into it and realized that their setback had a time expiration on it. So just an example of how interval data is valuable. If that kept on, their utility bills for a lot of their buildings, would have been a problem, plus whatever demand charges they would have in the buildings, would have been set by no one occupying their buildings. So really important to have that interval data. For campuses, the integrating process of purchased utility internal campus distribution. So tracking your incoming vendor bills, your plants and generation, tracking the distributions around campus, and distributions could be tracked, through submeter reads. If you don't have submeters on buildings or in spaces of buildings, creating split percentages or using formulas to come up with a monthly allocated bill or cost. Real heavily used with campus, higher ed, where you're functioning like a utility company and you're needing to create monthly allocation bills. So this gets into both the energy management side and the accounting side, where accountants need to know what department to bill for their consumption and use of space within buildings. But then energy management says, hey, we don't have a vendor meter on this building. We only have an internal meter, or we don't have a meter at all, but I still would like an idea of what this building is consuming based on, this kind of formula and this educated guess. So those activities get to be highly, highly important for campuses, and to manage that outside of spreadsheets in a structured way where you can get good visibility of everything, and then reconcile all the downstream versus what's generated, as well, and track line loss and even allocate line loss back to departments if you need to. To streamline accounting workflow processes, get data in, get it processed, get it audited, verified, and then electronically communicate with financial systems to streamline processes. And then functions to have, approve bills, audit bills, run accruals, things like that. Generally, if you're doing this, you're eliminating late fees and allowing your team members to have more time to do more important activities. If you have data, you then can prioritize projects and then go out and get funding for projects. And then the question always comes up, what is the estimated use and cost avoidance that can be reasonably attributed to energy management efforts, or, say this particular project? That's always a loaded question. So having good data and having weather data so you can do weather normalized comparisons, being able to baseline and then track a savings period compared to base, but adjust for changes in weather, changes in use of the building, floor area, changes in scheduling. Right now, just trying to compare April this year compared to April last year, how do you do that? That's actually going to be a huge challenge for at least all of our clients, let alone all of you. So you need to have tools to be able to properly baseline and make adjustments to your base to meet today's conditions, and then start to track your savings. And it's really important to have IPMVP compliant protocols in place that have been battle tested and verified by third-party auditors, just to make sure that the reported savings you're reporting on, are legitimate, that it's not just, a random calculation generated, so when you say to your budget office, we gave you X dollars for a project and we financed it and did it pay off, you can actually get a very good answer back to them. Benchmarking and peer groups are really nice to do. We hear a lot from campus users that want to benchmark dorms and other peer buildings so they can run dorm competitions, things like that. That's all great. So you want some benchmarking capabilities, but then also some peer groups, being able to put meters or buildings into peer groups, just even for reporting purposes and for various advanced workflow purposes. We look at benchmarking really being three types. One is external. So that's the Energy Star, the national benchmarks, things like that. So one good form of benchmarking, but then the other two are internal. So internal, it would be your one building versus others peer buildings. So how do those stack up? But then really the third level of benchmarking is, how does this building or meter compare against itself over time? And that question again can be difficult, where you need the right tools to make sure that your data is weather normalized. So if you're comparing this period versus last, you're throwing out the weather factor, but then also calendarized. So if you're comparing this April versus last April, this April has 32 days in the billing cycle, last has 28, you got to make sure that you're on a level playing field there. So again, making proper adjustments so then you can internally benchmark objects against one another fairly, and spot any problems or buildings that might be good candidates for your next project. If you have great data, you need good business intelligence tools to analyze the data and give it and serve it up to stakeholders. So being able to report in various buckets, actual, calendarized, normalized is a must. Needs to have data export capabilities, because any EMIS that you would ever look at, it's going to have its own canned version of reporting and analysis, but you still want the ability to export data to do some ad hoc reports yourself. Having supported and documented APIs and SDKs are also really nice. SDKs are software development kits that your technical team can take the data in the database and just do things with it and interact with it outside of the UI. You know, having a system that's flexible to do that is important. What we're seeing is client needs to connect to business intelligence tools. So Tableau, Power BI are the two most common ones that our clients are using. We're actually in the process of creating a new plugin for Power BI to allow users the ability just to launch Microsoft Power BI and say, give me my EnergyCAP data, and then do whatever they want in Power BI, taking the data in the database and serving it up in a way that they want to look at it, but also mashing that with other data that they have in other systems. So kind of the world of creating, you know, dashboards and reports in your own system, yeah, we continue to do that, at least ourselves, but then making powerful tools to put in your hands and hands of the campus to do your own custom dashboarding and analysis is also becoming very important. We have numerous campuses that are leveraging dashboards and embedding those into their websites. These dashboards are shareable, and they're a good way to give access to stakeholders and student groups and others. You want to find an EMIS and a company that provides ongoing support and upgrades and has good help documentation and training resources. Also retro-commissioning, like you would retro-commission a building over time and fine-tune it, having some resources available that as your campus changes over time, you know, a company and some expert staff can help you fine-tune your data and make adjustments as time goes on. I leave with this before we start Q&A. The 3 conclusions from a university, okay? Number 1, an EMIS helped reduce staff overhead. So it now takes them a half day to process billing. It used to take a lot longer than that. So they're saying once a month, half day, boom, we're done. That's it, that we can focus on other activities. They're using OCR, optical character recognition services, to replace their manual entry. So instead of looking at utility bills and keying bills into a spreadsheet and then also their SAP and other systems, you know, to get bills paid, they just send us the PDF, we OCR it, load it, and all the bill data flows from there. Reduce time to prepare reports. They're using some canned reports. They also create their own SSRS reports based on the SQL database. They thought having the database structure makes it easier for reporting than going to spreadsheets and other ways. And then standardize audits to help correct, you know, problems, spot problems, correct issues. Number 2, improve data visibility and usability. So real easy to understand graphic displays. One-click copy data to clipboard, paste to Excel for any ad hoc requirements. Simple meter selection. Basically, how they set data up is real simple to understand. Commodities underneath a building underneath, you know, part of campus. So their multi-campus deployment made it real easy for stakeholders to find data. Unique views for accountants and engineers. Targeted views for campus systems. They don't have to do anything for weather data normalization. They enter meter and bill data, and data automatically gets linked to the closest weather station and then weather normalized. This particular campus, on their website, their facility and sustainability website, they've embedded dashboards for public consumption. They found that to be very easy to do, and they have their whole campus, interval data, benchmark data, cost avoidance, you know, numbers. They are one of our leaders in that category to distribute data to stakeholders. And then lastly, improve confidence in data. So we talked about it numerous times. Data is king. It's only king if you're confident in it. And most kings, if you read your history, were confident. So it's the single system of record. There's standard repeatable reports, audit trail. That's a genuine theme that data is being looked at, audited, verified. Secure, system. You can only log in if you have access to objects if you have a user account, but you can allow a lot of stakeholders to access because you limit their capabilities, what they can and can't do. Automatic billing audits, improved collaboration. And again, something that I think also is a recurring theme is it's a common language. So a lot of our campuses say, if you can standardize, we have a common language among our campus, but now also a common energy language to other campuses. So I'm hoping you learned something from all of that and you had some takeaways. I will now respond to questions, and we do have a few questions that were submitted ahead of time that I will go through now, and we'll see what other questions attendees had asked. So one question, does EnergyCAP interface with building automation systems? What are the costs? Great question here. So EnergyCAP, we look at, I would explain as it's a metering or a BAS system agnostic system. It doesn't really matter what BAS or metering system you have in place. EnergyCAP allows you to import data. You can import through an Excel CSV file. If your system just exports data, there's API infrastructure that you can use to help connect to systems. So really how depends on what that system is and the frequency of data you want to come in. A lot of clients are using BAS systems to track real-time data, so they're looking at bringing in data kind of more or less post-consumption, where they set up hourly or every few hour processes to bring the data into EnergyCAP. Costs are variable depending on, really the size and magnitude of the system. In general, the costs are one time for the integration, and most metering systems aren't really all that complex. A lot of times we write rules as part of an integration to say, if meter data has drops in data, or there's problems with it, catch it, alert someone, that there might be a meter failure or a meter is offline. So there gets to be logic built in, but once that is built, it tends to work for a long time because just the nature of interval data itself is pretty easy. So costs generally are one time to do the integration, and then it generally works for years and years thereafter. Can we track renewables in EnergyCAP? Absolutely. There's really no limitation on what commodity you can track, what unit of measure. There's a flexible unit system that allows you to even build commodities in units of measure. So yes, you can track renewables. You can apply or not apply GHG emission factors to renewables. You can track, credits to GHG and just things like that. So there's really no limitation on what you can track in EnergyCAP. How can we show the savings that we've achieved so management recognizes our success? The first recommendation here would be to track the project itself. So there is a project tracking tool that lets you track the category of the project, name of the project, date implemented, date started, funding source, how much the project costed, the calculation and various notes about the project. So first step is really tracking what projects are happening within which buildings. But the next would be to run the cost avoidance or the measurement and verification of savings engine on your meters that are part of any project. So you can compare your baseline and then really your once your project has been completed, what the savings are after you set up the cost avoidance and take into account as many factors as you need to get an accurate savings calculation. So again, kind of 2 steps there: track the project and then run the engine to show your savings numbers. How long does it take to implement a solution like EnergyCAP? Bit of a fully loaded question, but the realistic timeline for a university campus would be 8 to 14 months. And the reason being is there's just a lot of steps that go into it. If you ask me how long would it take to set up meters so I can enter a live bill, that's kind of a different question than saying we want to run through all of our business processes and business rules and document all of them and configure everything 100%, set up all of our dashboards and reports to be automatically emailed to stakeholders and so on and so forth. Plus there's vacation time and things like that, and challenges like working from home. So we tend to find for most campuses, we're looking at like an 8 to 14 month implementation cycle. Is EnergyCAP best suited for large universities? Yeah, EnergyCAP's really suited for any organization that manages, buildings and gets utility bills and has a need for it. I mean, I track my own house in EnergyCAP because I want the data. I'm a data-driven person. I want to look at my utility bills, and I've done some projects in my house, and I want to track, the savings that I've been receiving due to those projects. And years ago, I implemented, I installed a new HVAC, and hey, I want to see if the HVAC company's guarantee of savings really is hitting the mark. So EnergyCAP's great for large or small campuses. It's valuable. It allows you to give life to your data. So there's no limitations. Let me, just while we have some extra time here, I want to see if we have any other questions. If any of you need to drop off, feel free to. So let me just say thank you. We will send a follow-up email that includes links to this recording and also a document. It's a field guide that we've published called How to Spec and Purchase an Energy Management Information System. It covers some of the things I talked about today, but really informative if you're in the market for a new EMIS. And you can contact our sales team at sales@energycap.com and our phone number. We post a lot of information on our website, especially at energycap.com/resources. Okay, other questions. Does EnergyCAP have user interfaces that allows users to see hourly data? Yeah, there's various trending charts within the system that lets you look at your interval data, really however you have it presented, if it's 15-minute hourly, whatever the interval is. So yes, there are views to look at the interval data in whatever interval you have. Okay, I think that's all the questions that I'll answer right now. Actually, I'll just address this one. It's actually from an existing user, just in the interest of answering your question if you're still on. And it was basically around, do we have webinars and materials because this person's new at the campus that's using EnergyCAP? We do post a lot of information on our website. So go to energycap.com. The other resource you can go to is helpcenter.energycap.com. So we have links to help resources, training videos. We have a YouTube page with training videos. You could always go to YouTube and search for EnergyCAP. We post training and how-to and overview videos there. But again, helpcenter.energycap.com is a very good resource, both for non-users and existing users, just to learn more about our particular platform, our services, what we do. We have a lot of help options. Well, thanks to all of you for being attentive and for listening to this. We will follow up with all of you. I really wish you all well, and we will all get through this, and hopefully all of the campuses will be up and running this fall. I'm really hoping that that's the case, and we all get back to normal. Have a good rest of the day. Enjoy Memorial Day, and be well. Take care. Bye-bye.